Hi, everyone. It's great to be here at the inaugural Large Sense Usage Economy Summit. My name is BJ Niles, and I'm a Senior Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services. So today I've prepared a presentation for you entitled Generative AI and Beyond, AWS's Strategy for Value-Driven Pricing Models. So I'm going to talk about a few different topics today. First, we'll talk about AWS's pricing philosophy, which Adam has already mentioned is very much a usage-based pricing philosophy. From there, I'll talk a little bit about pricing considerations for GenAI products, give you some things to think about when you're trying to price your GenAI feature or product. And then finally, we'll talk about a little bit of the technical strategies for your GenAI pricing, okay? So first and foremost, I don't think we need to introduce AWS or Amazon Web Services, but just to be thorough, AWS provides cloud computing services for a variety of different customers, and we provide a variety of different services that you can use as what I like to call Lego pieces to build and solve your business problems. So we've been in the business of providing cloud computing services for 18 years now. So we launched in 2006 with 3 services. In 2024, we have now 200 plus services across IT domains. The other thing I think that's very important to understand is that we really like to innovate on behalf of our customers. So of those 200 plus services, 90% of them come directly from customer feedback, right? And that's something that we really like to pride ourselves with, as well as taking the economies of scale that we have achieved through supporting so many customers and passing those economies of scale through price reductions to our customers. So really diving into some of our pricing philosophy, if you will, one of the main tenets of our pricing philosophy is usage-based pricing, right? Pay for what you use. And this had a very personal impact on me. I remember when I was transitioning my career to cloud computing back in about 2015, 2016, I had attended an AWS summit where our CTO, Werner Vogel, had done a presentation, a keynote speech, where he delivered a quote that had a very meaningful impact on me. And what he said was that cloud computing, driven by AWS, combined with usage-based pricing, is democratizing large-scale IT infrastructure. So what that means is that back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, if you wanted to have the next Google or the next Facebook, you needed to have a very large capital investment for you to go ahead and build out that infrastructure to be able to serve those customers. So now with AWS, anyone with a credit card and a great idea can go spin up an account and have world-class infrastructure at their fingertips. Right? A very revolutionary idea at the time it came out in 2006, because many IT vendors were not having this type of pricing model, if you will. So this is very much dear and near to my heart in terms of usage-based pricing, and something that I think really supports new entrepreneurs into getting into this space. As I already mentioned, the next important aspect to our pricing model is passing on the economies of scale to our customers. And as much as it sounds altruistic, right, in the sense that we love delighting our customers, there's a real business reason why we do this that I'm going to touch on in the next slide. The other 2 points here are also equally important. I think Adam already hit on this, but it's important to understand that even though we have a usage-based pricing model, we do offer our customers the ability to commit. Right? If you have loyal customers that want to commit to your product and they want to purchase some level of commitment in exchange for a discount, this could definitely be a value transition that you want to provide, right? It doesn't have to be a one or all model, if you will. So going back to that philosophy of passing on economies of scale through price reductions, right? Why would we do this? So what you see on the presentation slide here is this idea of a self-reinforcing loop, or internally at Amazon, what we call the flywheel effect, right? And this was popularized by Jeff Bezos at his time when he was working at Amazon.com. And what we believe here is you can create a business mechanism that once you start it, it has a self-reinforcing loop. So imagine at Amazon.com, we wanted to funnel growth, right? Which is in the middle of that slide. And one of those things that funnel growth is customer experience, right? If we have a delightful customer experience, we're going to drive more traffic to the Amazon.com platform, which means that we're going to have more sellers that want to sell on the platform, which means that we'll have more selection, and more selections mean a better customer experience. And you can see that self-reinforcing loop continue to grow, right? But you can go ahead and hack this loop. Right? Imagine we're able to go ahead and hack that loop by lowering the cost structure, by making it cheaper for sellers to provide same-day delivery or one-day delivery, right? Lowering that cost structure, again, delighting our customer and really pulling on that lever to have that self-reinforcing loop. Now let's transition to AWS, right? Why do we have better or provide cheaper prices to our customers? Well, again, going back to that customer experience, if we reduce that price of our services, meaning that customers can save money, they can go ahead and reinvest that money into growing their business, meaning that if they grow their business, they're going to grow their spend on AWS, reinvest that back into R&D, which means that we can go ahead and reduce prices, right? Again, that's self-reinforcing loop, if you will. So again, something you can take away from this presentation is think about these kind of reinforcing loops within your business and see how price or the usage-based economy can help drive that. So now let's transition into pricing considerations for generative AI. And to make this real, what I wanted to show you is our, what we call the generative AI stack. Okay, so these are the AWS generative AI services that we offer at AWS, and you'll see they're organized in this chart into different layers, or what we call the IT stack. So the way you want to think about this is at the very top, you'll have the application layer, and this is where our service teams have integrated state-of-the-art machine learning models into applications that you can leverage out of the box, right? Not much you have to do. You can just leverage them. One of these products could be Amazon Q for Builders, which is our AI coding assistant. So that helps developers be able to generate code based on the problems they're trying to solve, generate test cases, things of that nature. If you go to the middle layer now, you have our model as a service layer, which is Amazon Bedrock. Right? Amazon Bedrock is where we provide you a variety of different models from different vendors through a unified API for you to be able to build out your specific applications, your generative AI features, things of that nature. At the very bottom layer is where we have the infrastructure layer. This is where we provide atomic compute capacity in the form of virtual machines or containers with a variety of different hardware capacities like GPUs or our custom silicon to be able to train and host your generative AI models on AWS. Okay, so that gives you a brief history or a little bit of a high-level view of our different services. But the real reason why I wanted to show this is that if you look at this stack, the way we've priced this, right, differs depending on the audience we're trying to support, right? So at the very top here in the application layer, you have more subscription-based pricing, so it's going to be users or seats per monthly pricing. And then as you move into the middle layer, or the very bottom layer, this is where we get into more usage-based pricing, right? And there's obviously research and time and effort that's been going into determining these pricing models, and some of these ideas I'll share with you as we go through this presentation. So, before we get into those considerations I mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about the challenges with pricing generative AI models, right? And these are challenges I've personally experienced working with my own customers, right? So the first one is high operational costs. So when we say large language models, we're talking about models that have billions of parameters, not millions, billions of parameters in these state-of-the-art machine learning models, which means that to host and run these models, we need these very large inference compute clusters, right? They're very expensive to run and maintain. The other part of this is ensuring availability in terms of service. Availability meaning that when your customers are using your service, it's available for them to consume, right? And obviously this goes back to the fact that because it's so high in terms of operational costs, as well as GPUs are hard to come by these days. A lot of people are buying up these GPUs. These go in tandem, making it very expensive to run these large language models. The second part of this is in terms of difficulty of forecasting, right? When we talk about how your customers are going to use your specific feature or product, you may not necessarily know right out of the gate how they're going to leverage it, right? So how do you determine what is the best pricing mechanism for that? And then finally, it's a very competitive landscape, right? Adam has already talked about this. Everyone is trying to put AI into their products, trying to find a way to differentiate themselves. And being that it's a competitive market, how do you make sure that you stay ahead of that curve, right? So in terms of some things to think about, try to switch here. Yeah. So in terms of a few things to think about in terms of how to come up with your pricing strategy, you have these kind of 4 pillars to think about, right? The first one is understanding your customer, right? And I think LogicSense really believes in this and embodies this. We also really believe this at AWS, which is working backwards from your customer problem and what is the value you provide to your customer. Right? How could you kind of come up with a usage-based pricing model if you don't know the value that you're providing to your customer, right? And the better that you're able to articulate that value, the better that you can tie that back to the pricing mechanism that you're going to go ahead and charge your customer, right? So first and foremost, understand your customer, understand the value that you provide to them. The second one is in terms of defining your pricing strategy. There's a variety of different pricing strategies, and depending on your business maturity, what you're trying to achieve, you might choose one or the other, right? So to give you some examples, a lot of these AI startup firms are going with more of a scorched earth approach, right? They're willing to operate at a loss to get market penetration or to acquire customers at scale, right? So I was reading about OpenAI this week. They reported that they had got $3.5 billion in revenue. A very large number, amazing achievement, but at a $5 billion loss, right? So that's a great amount of loss to acquire that much revenue. But if you look at their customer acquisition, this time last year, they had 100 million monthly active users. This time this year, they have 180 million monthly active users. So 80% growth, right? Eventually, if they continue at this pace, imagine the level of market penetration they can achieve, right? So this is one strategy on one side of the kind of coin, if you will. On the other side, you may have a loyal customer base that you've been selling to for a very long time, right? They understand your business. You understand the value that you provide them, and you're rolling out a feature to support them in something that they're doing already, right? So say something like intelligent document processing, right? This is something that is pivotal to your customer and you want to roll this out. Then you're in a perfect place to really understand the value that you're providing to the customer and provide that incremental pricing strategy using something like usage-based pricing, where you can really determine, hey, this is the margin that I'm willing to include, and this is the value we provide to the customer, and it's an equal or favorable value transaction, if you will. The next part of this coin is in terms of calibrating your package, right? What this really means is, imagine you visit my splash page for my company offering. This really comes down to is what is my offer and what is the monetary exchange for that offer, right? And calibrating your package can come in a variety of different mechanisms, but really it comes back to understanding that value metric that you're going to be charging back to the customer, because that's the easiest way for your customer to really make sense of the price, right? You see a price and you realize, hey, this is the value that I'm getting for the price, then it all makes sense to me, right? The other part of this that I'll get into later in my slides is about tiering, right? If you use tiering, this is a really good tool in the tool belt to help you have more levers when it comes to pricing strategies, right? Trying to have one price that fits all of your customers is really hard to achieve and nail down. But with tiering, you can have different buckets of pricing that enables you to target different groups of customers and have different experiences you can offer them. And then the final part of this is evaluate and iterate, right? We never want to think that a price is kind of a fixed entity that we can't touch, right? Once you launch your product, you're going to get market feedback. You're going to get user feedback. Take that feedback and determine how you're going to change your price over time, right? For example, Netflix and a lot of the streaming companies, they started off with the scorched earth approach. They sold their streaming at a much cheaper rate, but you'll see over time they've increased it once they've realized they've had market saturation, right? So that's an example of how you can adjust over time. So those are the four pillars that you can think about when you think of your pricing strategy, if you will. And one of the ones that I think is worthwhile focusing on is really deeply understanding your customer. I think if any one of these you want to take away is you need to understand the value that you provide to your customer and what they're taking away from your product, if you will, right? And once you understand that value, then you really want to understand the usage pattern, right? How are they using your product and what does that usage look over time? Right? And you might be asking yourself, well, Vijay, how am I supposed to come up with this value number? How do I know what they're willing to pay or how much they value my product? And one thought exercise you can go through is this idea of willingness to pay, right? And it doesn't have to be a thought exercise. You can actually go through the process of doing customer surveys or customer advisory groups. I know LogiSense is doing one later today. Or even your sales teams. They're going to be very attuned to understanding your customer's willingness to pay from every sales cycle that they've actually gone through the process of, right? So a few of these kind of ideas that you can keep in mind in terms of determining willingness to pay, at the very top end, right, you're going to set your price so high that customers balk at the idea of buying it, right? They look at it, they walk away. Like for me, whenever I go to a luxury goods store and I see a shirt priced at $1,000, I'm like, how does that even make sense? But there is a customer willing to buy it, right? So you're going to have this price that's going to be at a threshold that no one's willing to buy this product. At the same time, your price may be so low that we as humans naturally perceive it as being low value, right? I call this the dollar store effect, right? We never walk into a dollar store and buy a product and say, hey, I'm going to pass this down to my kids. It's going to last that long. Most of the time, you know it's going to last 3 uses and you're okay with that, right? Or another example is freemium models, right? A lot of times, if you look at these mobile games, they'll get you in the door through a freemium model and then hope to charge you along the way, right? So those are kind of the upper and lower bounds, right? You want to get to another section there, which is called the pause and purchase, right? So the price is high enough to the point where in the sales cycle, the customer understands the value, but the price is high enough where they pause, they think about it for a second, they're like, hey, it's still worth it, I want to buy it. Right? And if you read the literature, they say that if your conversion rate is 100%, you're probably underpriced your product, right? Most of the time, you want to have some tension there between purchasing and being right away people are purchasing your product. And then eventually, you can decide, once you know these kind of levels, if you want to back off during sales cycles, or if you want to hit a revenue target, how you want to effectively price your product based on these bands that you've determined, right? So in terms of Gen AI pricing in the industry, right? So what we're seeing, and you already saw on my slide from AWS, we have kind of two camps here, right? And a lot of times there could be a hybrid approach as well. You have on one side usage-based pricing, and with AWS, what we're seeing and what I'm seeing in the industry, in my personal opinion, is a lot of the products that are aimed towards developers building something, right? For example, model as a service, or transcription as a service, or document processing as a service. A lot of these are priced as a usage-based pricing, right? For all the reasons that Adam had shared, this is a really good model to get your customers purchasing. On the other hand side, what I'm seeing personally is that a lot of these products that are aimed towards end consumers are being priced at usage-based pricing, or user-based or seat-based pricing, right? And I put a lot of thought into it, and I was wondering why this is the case. And a part of me truly believes that this is a historical artifact, right? This is kind of how business was done, so a lot of folks are doing this moving forward, right? And I really think that having these types of summits that LogicSense is putting on is really part of educating the industry about the movement to usage-based economy and usage-based pricing, because every benefit that you can think of that you can achieve from a monthly subscription model, you can pass to your customer through a usage-based model, right? The last piece, and I put this at the very bottom, kind of spanning the two different categories, is this idea of tiered-based pricing. So when it comes to pricing your generative AI applications and features, tiered-based pricing is a really useful feature in helping you find different ways to help and delight your customers. And I'll talk about that in my next section. So let's go into kind of some of the technical details. How do you enable usage-based pricing, and some of the strategies in terms of tiered-based pricing, if you will. So what I have here is a diagram showing you how usage-based pricing works on more of a technical level. It's a very high-level diagram, but it's enough to kind of prove the point, right? So if you see here on this diagram, on the right-hand side, we have two tenants. Tenants are just customers. So you have tenant 1, tenant 2, and they're accessing the application labeled number 2 to perform some type of service that you're offering, right? If you have a multi-tenant architecture, meaning you have multiple customers sharing the infrastructure, you need to find a way to be able to determine, hey, is this user 1 from tenant 1, or is this user 3 from tenant 2, right? How do you make sense of these users and tie it back to the customer that's using the service, right? And this is part of the plumbing that needs to go in place to be able to achieve a usage-based pricing model, right? And once you have that, what we call tenant context, you also need to be able to publish that to some type of analytics platform to be able to achieve that, right? So when it comes to building out these types of usage-based pricing model, you need this technical fundamental step in place first, right? And with any IT decision, you always have the build versus buy decision, right? You can build this plumbing or you can buy this plumbing. And this is where I really need to kind of plug our good friends at LogicSense, because they provide the exact services that allows you to build this plumbing necessary for a usage-based pricing model, right? So instead of having to necessarily build this yourself, and some things that we say at AWS all the time is, if this is not part of your core business, right, you're probably better off letting the experts take care of it, and you can focus on your core business. So moving on to tiering strategies, and why we believe it's so effective, is that tiering strategies, as I mentioned, give you an ability to provide different experiences for your customers, and gets you away from the fallacy of trying to come up with one price that's going to support all of your customers and all of their needs, right? And especially if you're running what's called a multi-tenant environment where you have multiple customers on the same underlying infrastructure, it also helps you avoid what's called the noisy neighbor problem. So for the folks who are not familiar with the noisy neighbor problem, if you have multiple customers on the same underlying infrastructure, right? You can have a scenario where you have a big customer that has such large usage, they're affecting all the other customers on the platform, right? And when you have a SaaS platform or XaaS platform, you really want to avoid this scenario because you don't want one customer's usage affecting another customer's usage, right? And tiering enables you to do that. So what does this look like in practice, specifically when it comes to AI? So when you look at the top right-hand corner, you can implement tiering in different ways. So the first one here is experience-based tiering. So this is where, for example, you can have a basic tier where you have generic models that customers can use, which is great, but as Adam had mentioned, it's nearly not as cool as being able to incorporate your own data that's specific to your business. So if you had a premium tier, imagine you can combine that with your own proprietary data to really draw value for your business, right? The second part of this, on the left-hand side, is the idea of having some type of service level agreement tiering, right? And this is going to solve some of those technical challenges I mentioned about high operational costs for hosting these models, right? So imagine you had a basic tier that has throttling, and then you have a premium tier that has higher limits or no throttling whatsoever, right? And if you look at the large AI startups like ChatGPT, Anthropic, Perplexity, they'll have a basic tier, which is free, that you could use maybe with very high throttling, and then a premium tier where you can pay to unlock the full potential of the service overall, right? And the very middle of this diagram shows you that tiering is not something that you use by itself, but combine it with already a base and usage-based pricing or usage-based consumption pricing. So another view on this exact same idea of tiering can be thought of as providing you different qualities of service, right? So you can have a basic tier where you offer to your customers access to smaller models that are cheaper to host, right? Or you can have a premium tier that gives access to a large variety of different models, or even the best models for them to leverage, right? So just another example to take a look at. So in summary, what I want you to take away from this presentation is, first and foremost, it's important that you understand your customer, you understand the problem you're solving for them, and specifically the value that you're providing to your specific customer, right? And by working back from that value metric, it makes it much easier for you to build out that usage pricing strategy for you to provide them. The next part of this is that usage-based pricing alleviates some of the technical challenges with generative AI that I mentioned earlier. And if you want to get started on usage-based pricing and you're not already doing it, then you need to get some of that fundamental plumbing in place, right? And again, you have that build versus buy decision, but if it's not core to your business, then it really does make sense to leave it to the experts to take care of. Then you want to think about tiered-based pricing, right? How can you leverage tiered-based pricing to be able to provide different experiences to your customer and get away from that idea of just having one pricing model that is supporting all of your customer needs? And then lastly, if you have loyal customers that want to commit to you and want to be able to get that exchange in terms of value for that commitment, then provide that offering to them, right? So thank you so much. I really appreciate being here today. Thank you.